When I'm walking down the street.
I do want to say to Donnie and many of you in this room that over a very long career in this city, all of you have helped me and my colleagues tell the truth and to try to tell.
I may not look like you and you me, but
my head up.
I'm from South Carolina, so I just
What does this event mean to you, Miss Peggy Moss?
Oh, my heart.
Happy 20th anniversary.
My heart is about loving up on my sisters. Do you know what it feels like to have your sisters in the room? John.
and dare to be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. I am beautiful, I am blessed, but not just what you see in the flesh. I'm free from people, free from myself. There's a
the doctor lived next door to the janitor, to the reverend, and the lawyer. We were together. Now we get so high and mighty that you create stress for your society because you don't like poor black folks anyway. That's a health problem. Get yourself together so I can stop being taking care of geriatric people and get back to pediatrics. I thank you, Donnie, for all you've done. Let's keep doing it all the more.
letting His glory shine through. Dare to be you, dare to be me, dare to be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. And I dare you, I dare you, I dare you to be you.
First name's Donnie, last name's Glover. Entered the winner for the long haul, baby. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, and let me tell you, today is a really, really special one because we get to interview a gentleman who has mentored me for the past 20 years. His name is Charles Robinson. Charles F. Robinson III is an award-winning journalist who works in radio, television, and print. Born in Richmond, Virginia. Now, that's a Black Wall Street for all of you people out there who got my second book, I Am Black Wall Street. Where's the darn book? It's around here somewhere. Maggie Lena Walker, Jackson Ward, that's his neck of the woods. That's his bailiwick. Born in Richmond, Robinson grew up in Baltimore. And not just anywhere in Baltimore. He grew up in North and Bentlow. Shout out to Bentlow Street. Not Bentaloo, that a lot of those new television people, the way they pronounce it, it's Bentlow. Okay, grew up in Baltimore, began his journalism career by delivering the Baltimore Afro-American Newspaper while still in junior high school. And he may have went to Lamel, I'm not sure. We'll double check with him. Since 2001, he has served Maryland Public Television as a political reporter for State Circle. Currently, he is the associate producer of Maryland Public Television's Hard Working Family series, which recently won a CINE Golden Eagle award. During Robinson's career, he's worked on television as a reporter in Richmond, West Palm Beach, Cincinnati, national correspondent for BET, radio as news director at WEAA, political analyst on WEAA, and executive producer of TPT Radio Network, Washington, D.C. And print, damn, Charles, you want a lot of stuff. Print as editor-in-chief of Sphinx Magazine. And that sounds like some of that Alpha Phi Alpha stuff. All right, during his career, he has covered the impact of the Rodney King verdict, the story behind the monument to the Amistad Revolt, the history of the Buffalo Soldiers, and the Million Man March. His coverage of Nelson Mandela's first trip to the U.S. won him an award from the National Association of Black Journalists. Robinson attended Virginia Commonwealth University, once again in Richmond, Virginia, home of a Black Wall Street, where he began his career in broadcasting at the campus radio station WJRB, now WVCW. WVCW was named by Billboard Magazine in 1979 as one of the most innovative college campus radio stations in the United States. And tell me, have you ever gotten an introduction like that, son?
Well, it was long, if nothing else. But
Tell
no,
me. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And I appreciate always being on with you, Donnie, because it allows me to kind of get my voice out. And that is one of the things we talked about early on, that sometimes I need to get my voice out. And
he gave me an award, the
Association of Black Media Workers. Yes, early on.
Best New Media.
That's Best New Media.
B-More News has been on the scene 4 years. And you kind of like, I became a made man after that.
Well, I tried to invite you to things that I thought, first of all, you had a particular expertise. And I said, why don't you come on and join me here and talk to other journalists who were trying to figure out what that next thing was. And, you were one of the early purveyors of backpack journalism. In other words, you had a backpack and you had a bunch of things in it. And I always joke, ask Donnie what he's got in his backpack. And that became, one of the many things. And like I said, part of what my mission is these days is to find the next Donnie Glover, because I know there are folks who are out there who are trying to push the envelope. And, not everybody's going to like your style of journalism, but I remind folks all the time that, in this world in which we inhabit, we need people who sometimes push, pull, and drag people screaming, because, this enables if you will, a unique nomenclature of how you do this work. You don't really need a degree to do this work, but it's okay if you have one. But the other part of that is you must be honest, you must be factual, and you must be able to say something. I've told you over the years, if you create a podcast and no one listens to it, that's called talking to yourself. If you create a piece of video and only you, your girl, your boo, or whoever watches it, we call that home movies. If you write something and no one reads it but you, we call that a diary. In the mass communication business, we must speak to people where they are and provide something other than pontificating on, as I like to call, navel watching. There are a number of people, and you know them, Donnie, who sit in their mama's basement and don't have what I call a coherent thought. Because one, they are in a basement and they don't go out and put themselves to observe, nor do they do the due diligence by going to sources other than Wikipedia. It's one thing that, your years of experience and know-how gives you a sense of what truth-telling is. But it's another thing to be witness. Soledad O'Brien said something when the National Association gave her an award for her work. And what she said was this: we must bear witness. And what does that mean? Bearing witness means that I was there to hear things and to report out not just what I heard, but to kind of give it context. Because it's one thing just to, regurgitate what people say. I know a lot of politicians would like for you to regurgitate because they send you press releases. Donnie, you've known me long enough to know I don't read press releases. You know why? Because I talk to people. And a lot of people don't get that you have to talk to people because maybe what they say doesn't make sense. And,
You're saying a press release is no more than a business card.
That's pretty much what it is. And, and I've had politicians, I've had corporations ask me, well, didn't you get our press release? I said, I could care less about your press release. Let's have a conversation. And I think that is one of the,
okay, let me just jump in. If you are running for governor of the state of Maryland, I need you to name 3 places that somebody running for governor needs to know in order for Charles Robinson III. You're the third, right? For
That's
Charles Robinson to say, because you wrote the article before this governor was elected. There were 3 places on there in West Kakalaki, Maryland, some damn where. And I was like, where the hell did he get these places from? Tell him, Charles, if you're running for
first
governor.
and foremost, you got to know places in the state. The first place I talked about was Maryland City. Most people don't realize that Maryland City is right outside of Laurel. And if you don't know where that is, then you really shouldn't be running. The other place is a place, it's called The Cut. It's in Hancock. It's in far western Maryland.
Now, you're not talking about the old Jessup House of Corrections, aka The Cut.
No. This is in far western Maryland. If you're going to Hancock, because it's on your way to like Frostburg and to Deep Creek Lake, because it has a unique constituency there. And it's in the mountains, and most people don't realize it. There are Black folks in those mountains and who've lived there for eons, and and most people, because we live in the I-95 corridor, believe that most Black people live in that corridor, but there are Black folks who live out there.
Pardon my ignorance. Is this anywhere near Lisa Gladden's Negro Mountain?
Yes, it is. To get there, you got to go through the Cut. But the other place I talked about is Deal. Deal is it's in southern Maryland, and it is a community that is primarily farmland. It's near Charles County. And what I think, and you and I have talked about this, Charles County is a rural county that is now
Isn't that the most difficult word to pronounce? Rural.
Yes, but the thing about it is that it now is represented by, get this, a Black state senator, at least 3 Black delegates, and it is changing. It began. It's now almost like a bedroom community for Washington, D.C. It's where the folks who couldn't move into Prince George's County are now moving to because the land is cheaper. And, what's really interesting to me, it is one of the up and coming African-American communities with political power that have been basically held back by a white power structure. And now they've come into their own. But that's the fun part of what I get to do, Donnie.
Why did you become a journalist?
I think part of it was...
Was it a dare? Is that true?
Oh, well, yes. But I think the thing that really kind of influenced me was the 1969 riots. I watched the National Guard come into my neighborhood.
68 or 69?
68. I'm sorry. I'm You got me up early.
Tell me
You
about
know, but I watched as white reporters came to my neighborhood, and they never talked to anybody in my neighborhood. And like I
it.
said,
Why didn't they talk to anybody in your neighborhood?
because first of all, they were frightened. Second of all, you know, there's a Jewish term. They didn't have the chutzpah to say, what are people here concerned about? And you know, and it stuck with me for a long time that you got to talk to not just those who are affected, but as to the why. I think a lot of times, you know, reporters stick microphones in people's faces because tell me how you feel. Well, you know, that's an interesting concept. But I think the more important question is not how you feel, but why. You know, you know, look, I know crime. A lot of people believe crime is rampant in Baltimore City, but I think if
They believe that because that's what one particular news station floods the airwaves with.
And guess what?
all day, every day.
They can do whatever they want. I'm just not interested in that. And I think that it's a deeper question, and this it's not a simplistic answer. And part of that is that you oftentimes in urban areas all across the country, you know, people are getting gunned down. I am not immune from that. I recognize the pain and the sorrow that comes with losing a loved one. It is not easy to contextualize the how and the why. The why is difficult. The how is, I think, the most important thing. Because if you believe that the world is in turmoil and you walk outside your door and the turmoil's outside your door, then you have a different kind of conversation. I know
What did you feel in 1968 that you could have done better?
I don't think I could have done better because I was too young. I was like all of like 10 years old. But what I did find was I was angry. And my anger was that I wanted to burn the world down because I believed that it was not conducive to what I thought I might want to do. But what I did learn was that my anger could be taken out with a pen.
Who taught you that?
Probably my mother, who was probably my and she still is my greatest critic, and she always wants to edit me. I have stopped her from editing me a long time ago. And you know,
I think your mom should be baking me a pie because you've thrown it on me.
Right. Well, you know, Barbara Robinson is you know, a great wordsmith, but I have to remind her often that, you know, I do this for a living. And she often goes, well, that doesn't make any sense. I said, it doesn't have to make any sense to you because it makes sense to me. But I love my
When's
mother.
your mom's birthday? I got to learn more about Miss Barbara Robinson. I never heard you mention.
Well, you know, my mom always has me. She has always kept me grounded, and she has probably given me that sense of not just who I am, but whom I am. And the thing is that, you know, over the years, you know, she did, as you do, you edit me. And in the early days when she edited me, I was pissed. And remind yourself, I told you, remind yourself, think of me with this big afro and my black fist pick, and I want to burn the. She's like, hold on, maybe you can have. Well, probably the other thing was,
But you have to be really grateful to have a mom. As you describe your mom, I think back, my mom's been gone a long time, but I remember her typing up my first collection of poems.
right.
The support of a mom in a young person's writing career means everything, doesn't it?
It does. And here's that thing. I didn't know I wanted to be a writer, but I knew I was angry.
But she did. She had a better sense, her being older.
Yes.
She knows how many black men are writers.
Right.
My mother had to have some sense of how many black men are writers.
Right.
And so to have that support at home, because Charles, as you're talking, what comes to mind is the reality of today.
Right.
And you may have been the one who said it. Number one, we're coming through an America with 70% of black families headed by a single mother. But secondly, it may have been you who said to me, this is the first generation without mothers.
I don't think I said that, but I think you point to a paradigm that a number of young people, and I'll say young people, and specifically black boys and young men, who are challenged to be masculine and challenged to try and find purpose. You know, I you know how I gravitate to young men, because
young people in general. I've seen you mentor young men and young women.
yes, but specifically young men, because I think if you think you can write, you don't get much support. And part of that also is it ain't sexy. I say it like that. It ain't sexy.
It can be.
It can be. I mean, because what really kind of drove me was, I started listening to Nikki Giovanni, and I was like,
she got my first collection of poems that my mom typed up, and she wrote me a letter. Nikki Giovanni, big ups.
Well, I know Nikki Giovanni, and
tell her she wrote me a letter in 1983 that blew my mind. It reminded me of great.
Well, I was in love with her. I've told her.
Slow down. I do not want to be shot by Robbie. Okay.
No, she knows this, and I met Nikki in her hometown. Well, not her hometown, but in Cincinnati. And over the years, we'll run into each other. And she goes, Charles, you know stuff that a lot of people don't know. But here's that thing.
She took time out. That's what I'll never forget. She took time out for another writer, a young writer.
Well, here's that thing. She was schooled by Gwendolyn Brooks out of Chicago. She was part of this Black Writers Collective. And what really kind of, and you got to understand, Donnie, I don't do things for altruistic reasons all the time, but learning Nikki Giovanni's poems gave me an entree to meet a lot of fine black women. I
want to remind you that this is PG. This is family.
No. I want our young people specifically to understand poetry is a unique language as to how maybe you may not have the words to speak, but using the language of poetry, somebody may go, now, what did you say again? And I
want you to contrast Nikki Giovanni and Kendrick Lamar.
Well, I think they're both on the same page. I think Nikki finds Kendrick, as I do, one of these more, I don't want to call him an intellectual rapper as much as a introspective rapper. i.e., he exudes the pain of life, but he also has this unique creative genius that allows people to come into a world that they have no idea about. And
That's for sure.
I find myself drawn to him with every new project. It is usually profane. It is truly, that, he, on his latest album, he has a rant with supposedly his girlfriend that is just like, and I found myself drawn to it. I don't necessarily, prescribe to the way he does it.
He did one on sexual abuse that was just mind blowing. But recently he performed in Paris, and you had a problem with the performance.
Only thing I had a problem with was the fact that I thought he should have more musicians, because
he had no musicians. He was just
it was all tracks, and maybe it's because of growing up in Baltimore. I saw my friends who were great musicians and who performed live, and their performances were epic, and they influenced me. I mean, I'll never forget going to a friend of mine invited me to see a band called Chocolate Rain, and they were playing in a what I would call a warehouse on Belvedere. So I go, band's jamming, and then all of a sudden they have this special effect where it's called a flash bomb, and I was like, oh crap, I want to do that. And I ended up doing that when I went back to Virginia Commonwealth University. And a friend of mine, he said, Charles, it freaked people out. I said, well, that was the effect. But then, of course, I went to an earlier performance of them, and this was a time when the OJ's had For the Love of Money had just come out, and they appeared on stage, and guess what they did? They threw Monopoly money at the crowd, and the crowd went off. And that's what I'm saying. Performances, as I see them, aren't just about the music, but it's the interpretation of the music.
George Clinton, Bootsy Collins, what impact did they have? What impact
I
have
used
they
to
had?
hang out with members of the band because they were friends of mine, and they would go, come on, Charles, hang out with us. But I think the thing that was really mind-blowing for me was these were intelligent guys. They weren't just they were really intelligent. I mean,
Psycho, disco, alpha, beta.
Well, and it's funny that you mentioned that song.
Alpha, beta.
It's funny that you mentioned that song. I happened to be interviewing one of the brides of Frankenstein, and Funkenstein, sorry, not Frankenstein, but Funkenstein. And she said, we're doing a song about being underwater. I was like, what the hell is that?
Aqua Boogie Baby.
Yeah, that was Aqua Boogie.
Swim.
Right. And it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor for
Psycho,
life.
alpha, beta, disco.
Right. Not the refrain of the song. The idea, I never learned to swim. I didn't understand the rhythm of the stroke. And that's a metaphor for life. And I go back to Cosmic Slop.
Man, I was 12 years old. I wasn't breaking the song down like that. We were trying to go to the Eastwood disco.
But that was what was explained to me, that a lot of times, for us, all the craziness that George Clinton has, he uses it to further things. Like a lot of people listen to Maggot Brain, which is one of the more tour de force performances by the late, great Eddie Hazelwood. And I met Eddie, and Eddie was an interesting guy. The bad news, unfortunately, he was a heroin addict. And, but what George Clinton said to him before they played the song was, he said, Eddie, I want to talk to you about something. He said, on this song, I want you to think about your mother dying. And what you hear is Eddie Hazelwood basically grieving on maggot brain. What a bizarre way to inspire a musician. And I think Kendrick Lamar is in that vein.
Now these two collaborate, correct? Kendrick
They have
Lamar
collaborated. They have
and
collaborated.
George Clinton.
And what's fascinating about that is you think about Kendrick Lamar collaborating with SZA, and I think she's an artist who you want to watch, but it is how someone takes a simple idea and challenges them to try something different. I'm a big Jimi Hendrix fan, and it's the reason why Hendrix at Woodstock decides to play the Star Spangled Banner.
Who was more captivating, Jimi Hendrix or Marvin Gaye singing it in his own rendition?
I hate to say it, I'm going to go with Jimi Hendrix because no one expected him. I mean, just like Marvin Gaye did his song, no one expected it. But that is the idea of performance. You asked me why I was so upset, because I know there are musicians who could play with him that anybody would be honored to say, would you come play on this?
Okay. Charles, I want to go to Annapolis this week. You were invited to Government House and you made a post on social media. You said it was your first time ever being invited to Government House, going back to the days of Governor William Donald Schaefer. Is that true?
Yes, that is true. I mean, I have been on the grounds. I had never been inside the house. And
oh my goodness. What politician failed to see the value of inviting the Charles Robinson, senior journalist, especially for our community? And I say that with all due respect. I guess one day I might be senior journalist, but you carry the ball, and for you to be there on the watch of the first Black governor, I made it a front page picture over your shoulder, and I waited until he zeroed in on you in between questions about Bootsy and not Bootsy from the
Bootsy Collins.
Bootsy Collins.
Well, here's that thing, man. First of all, I'm always honored if I get an invite like that. I was a little kind of like, do I want to go? Because I don't like to go to off the record events like that. But I said,
there's nothing off the record, Charles.
Right. Because I'm never off the record, as you know. And
he knew that.
Right. Because I don't believe in that concept. I've had, unfortunately, several noted individuals claim it's off the record. I said, it's not off the record if I'm here. I said, I can't vouch for everybody in the room. You say something, I'm going to write it down. And some people have taken offense, but then they realize Charles isn't the only one who's going to be on the record. Every goddamn body else is going to be on the record. And it's important that, the reason why, and for young people and people who don't understand our business, on the record means that I can say things and you're going to write it down. If you tell me that it's off the record, technically, I can't attribute it to you, but I can say a source close to. And a lot of people think they understand that concept. And as a rule, I don't, I'll let somebody go off the record if I'm personally talking to them. Then I said, now let's get back on the record. Because it's important for people to record the comings and goings, specifically of politicians, because you can't take stuff back. Like I didn't want to say that. Oh, I didn't agree to that. And they did allow us to go on the record. I took some pictures, you took some pictures. And but here's that thing that all of us have times when we will have off the record conversations with people, because it allows them to give us both explanations, sometimes background, sometimes the ability to understand, well, why did you do that? But then, guess what I always come back to, Donnie? Let's get on the record.
So, Charles, again, I need you to tell me what was the experience of being in Government House on the watch of the first Black governor in the state of Maryland?
Probably for me, it was that whole idea that people like yourself and others who I've helped in my career were able to do something I couldn't do early on in my career. Because
eat the big shrimp and the crab balls?
I can't eat that stuff. Look, y'all can eat it. I can't.
I ain't gonna lie.
Look, I had some Pellegrino. That's all I have. But the experience of having a number of young Black journalists have that experience. Let me,
with a guide like you, in case we strayed off path.
Look.
If I would have done something wrong and you would have tapped me on the shoulder, I would have to listen. I don't know about the other youngsters, and not that it was that kind of scenario.
Right.
But we had senior journalist Charles there. We got Big Brother there. It's no messing up.
Right. But here's the fun part for me is, Government House is a historical house. It has a number of paintings in it. It has a number of artifacts in it. And each governor picks things that they like. Probably the thing that you enjoyed the most, like I did, was the portrait of Frederick Douglass, which was
the bust of Harriet Tubman.
And the bust of Harriet Tubman. But it was the picture of Douglass that moved me the most, because I saw it when I went in, and I asked the governor about it, and he said, "Well, Charles, the original this was originally in the back of the house. I decided to bring it to the front of the house," and I think that says and speaks volumes to how this first Black governor of the state of Maryland feels about Black culture.
Charles, you grew up in North and Bentlow.
Mm-hmm.
One block over lived Wiley Daniels. What impact did a Wiley Daniels have on your career?
He gave me the gumption to think I could do this stuff. Recently, one of the longtime anchors in Washington, D.C., Pat Muse, just retired. Pat, I believe, began in the early 70s as a reporter and then an anchor at Channel 4 in Washington, D.C. And I sent Pat this note. And Wiley Daniels didn't say it, but I think I can say it for him. You never know who's watching you. And what I mean by that is that there may be somebody who lives on Schroeder Street, on Pennsylvania Avenue, and sees you and goes, "You know what? I think I could do that." Because I know a Donnie Glover may not have conceptualized the idea I'm going to start BeMoreNews.com, but as he navigated his way, and anybody who navigated their way in Washington, D.C. saw Pat Muse, saw Donnie Glover, and said, "You know what? I think I can do that." And having not just the fortitude, but the encouragement of people who said, "Why don't you try that?"
Did anyone tell you you couldn't do it?
Hell yeah. Hell. I went to Virginia Commonwealth University in the capital of the Confederacy. I never had a black professor. And, and I've had some pretty interesting things said about me.
Would they try to tell you to take the trash out or something?
No, not quite that, but the inability of them to perceive me as competent. But, I grew up in a neighborhood that was filled with former World War II veterans and their wives, some principals, some educators. I used to hang out at Coppin State College. I saw H. Rap Brown.
Did you see Dr. King at Coppin?
I did not see him there.
Did Dr. King come through Coppin back then?
I never saw him there, but he did. There's a famous photograph of him on Pennsylvania Avenue.
In Gay
But
Street,
but more so than that is that the communities in which you and I lived, there was a cadre of people who wouldn't let you fail, who told you, no, if you're doing something wrong,
get off Warwick Avenue, go home.
Yeah. You don't need to be here.
Why are you here? Get away from here.
Or you happen to be at the YMCA down on Druid Hill Avenue because somebody said they got a summer program and you're going to go to it. Or you're at Easterwood.
And
someone said, some of the best basketball players are here. Or somebody told you to go to MSG, Madison Square Garden, to go and if you think you're good, try playing here. Or, I got a chance to watch a guy named Skip Wise. And I said to myself, my God, that's not just any average basketball. That's one of the baddest dudes I've ever seen.
Charles, most memorable interview, your favorite interview?
Of course, it's Nelson Mandela.
Okay.
And it's funny because it was me and April Ryan sitting on a tarmac as a Trump airline plane brought Nelson Mandela to Washington, D.C. And he walked up to me and April and said, "Why are you here?" And April and I were dumbfounded. We're sitting there going, because we're here for you. And then fast forward to 2 days later, I happened to be in Washington.
You in her book?
I don't know. The funny part is, her most recent book, I talked to her about that. And I've talked to her about all of her books. And I buy them because, I've known April. We've known each other for a long time. And, we're peers. And, and I always get excited for when my friends write books. And, when you wrote your first book, I was one of the first people to buy it. And I told everybody who was in the room, you're going to buy this book, whether you like it or not. And hundreds of copies.
What would possess you to drag me to the corner with my German Shepherd to the corner of Pennsylvania, northern Pennsylvania? What were you thinking?
Well, first of all, it was one of the most violent periods in the city. And we knew that the 300-man march was going to be coming down North Avenue. And I basically said, "Donnie, why don't you come go with me?" And you were kind of like, "Charles, this ain't gonna work." I said, "No, it'll work." And and me and technology, and I said, "Come on and just come hang." And then of course your dog was our guard dog, make sure nothing happened to us. But I wasn't worried.
Giving you a plug.
Look, I wasn't worried because, Donnie, you've known me long enough to know that Charles is not afraid of any area in the city. He is aware of things in this city. And like I said, look, I'm a son of Baltimore. I caught the bus, the number 13 bus, at North and Bedlow and went over to Greenmount Avenue. And, you know, I wasn't as big as I am now. And a number of people tried me. And trust me, it was treacherous. But, you know, as I like to say, I survived. You know, one day some guy wanted to take my bus pass and make me walk home. I said, dude, you're going to have to kick my ass. Because I'm just not going to give that up. It would have been a long walk. Now, could I have done it? Yes. But I just was like, here's where I stand and here's what I believe.
Charles, what do you think of mass incarceration, given the trials that you have gone through as a Black man, that you have gone through as a father? This country, and I'm not sure what numbers that Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates was looking at, but this country incarcerates almost as many people as China, a country with 5 times as many people. And this prison industrial complex stars Black men and Black women.
You know, Donnie, yesterday, Merrick Garland gave a particular indictment of the Louisville Police Department where Breonna Taylor was killed and died, and talked about how the systematic and policing concept of we can go after those people. You and I, look, policing in this country has to change, and it's going to go kicking and screaming. I am not of the opinion that lock them up so we don't see them, because those people come back to our communities. By the same token, unfortunately, and you know I've written about this many, many years, there's a mental health crisis. And this mental health crisis has unfortunately, I mean, think about it, Donnie. We are living with a post-epidemic of crack babies, people who were born from folks who were addicted.
Add into that lead paint,
all of that.
lead in the water, liquor stores on every corner, and now latest for breakfast.
Right. And the thing is that a young person who has had this kind of trauma, and that's what it is, it's trauma, and parents who've had to deal with that, they don't see what I would call the reasoning nor the right and wrong. You know, I gave you a shirt a couple of years ago that says, "You don't know me, yo." And guess what? That's what a lot of them think. You don't have any idea. And if you believe locking these people up, and don't get me wrong, for heinous stuff, you need not just mental health, but you need a concept of how do I fix you, or how do I help you?
Richard Pryor said, "Thank God for penitentiaries."
Yeah, well, I'm not necessarily.
He was out in Arizona.
Right. I'm not necessarily thrilled with this concept of I'm going to take a 12, 13, 14, 15, 17-year-old and throw him inside of an
adult institution.
In an adult institution.
Why?
That's wrong.
Why?
I'm sorry.
Why is it
That's
wrong?
wrong. Because guess what? They are developmentally, first of all, you're going to create future prisoners.
Would they do that to young white people if young white people were killing at the same level?
I don't know, but I know this.
You do know.
It ain't the answer.
You do know the young man in South Carolina who shot up the church and was taking the Burger King. They're not taking a young Black killer to Burger King.
Right. Well, like I said, look,
Charles, you never complain about racism. Why?
I don't have time for it.
Why, Charles? You know they did you wrong. You know they tried
I'm
to make you take
reminded
the trash
of
out.
part of that conversation I had with Nelson Mandela. And Mandela, who served close to 30 years in prison, said a very simple idea. I don't have time for hate. I just don't have time for it. Because and understand, if anybody
Had a right to be angry.
Nelson Mandela had one. And think about the indignities he had to endure. A wife he couldn't even be with. His colleagues decided to create a university within Robben Island. And it made me think back to King and how he was influenced by Mahatma Gandhi.
Even though Mahatma Gandhi wasn't all that keen on black people.
Doesn't make any difference. He got the concept. He got the concepts.
Because we remember the Indians in South Africa.
Right. He got the concept. He got the concept because he recognized that black folks have guns and had guns during the civil rights era. But he knew that arming black folks were not going to get us to where we need to be. Fast forward to a Malcolm X, Malik Shabazz, who also had a different way to get to that point. But after visiting Mecca, he also came to that idea. Hate is too great of a burden to bear.
Well, what's wrong with these people in this country climbing the walls of the Capitol on January the 6th? And this cat Trump, who could win the Republican nomination. Some people are fueled by hate, Charles.
That is true.
They got time for hate. So if they got time for hate, we better take time to protect ourselves.
I think that a number of those.
What happened if black people would have climbed the walls of that Capitol?
They would have been shot, but that's neither here nor there. I think
such a foregone conclusion, unacceptable.
Well, you ain't got to accept it. It's just the reality. Look, you remember that, they brought out the Capitol Police Force when they thought that a bunch of black folks were going to be there for an event. Look,
we saw how they did during the Million Man March.
Right. But here's that thing that I am eternally optimistic about.
See, these are called cowards, Charles. You can be politically correct all you want, but those are cowards.
Well,
those
they more than likely are.
You remember that security guard, the black man, and he was protecting Pence. I mean, it was almost like a NFL football scene.
Well, I think that
that man was afraid for his life.
I think a lot of times what we get are patriots. I mean, think about this. My late grandfather, who served in the 9th Cavalry, which was the Buffalo Soldier Unit, he went to war during a period when white soldiers told French women that all black men
had tails.
But yet and still he went. And I think if you listen to those veterans and veterans from World War II and veterans from Vietnam, and even those who come back from Afghanistan, they often kind of, I don't want to say romanticize, but there is a duty to country that goes beyond where you are today. Because they were always thinking about where they would be in the future. I mean, you think about those Black men who came back from all of those wars. Most of them were not greeted as heroes.
Some of them were lynched.
That's correct. But a lot of them knew that maybe I could provide for my family a better life. Some took advantage of the GI Bill, got educations. Others decided to do grassroots work in communities that were marginalized. But here's that thing that I think a lot of people don't always get. Internal fortitude is a great equalizer, i.e., I know my situation is bad, but I can make it better. And that is one of the true historical significance of how we survive things that were unsurvivable.
Okay, look, Charles, I got to interrupt you. We only got a couple of minutes left, and I got to get this question.
Sure.
Best female jazz singer ever?
Of course, it's Billie Holiday. and she's right around the corner from you. You know, that statue.
Okay, next question. Last final question. What do you want the next generation of journalists to accomplish?
I want them to push the envelope. I want them to know that they're not alone, that impediments are not your problem as much as how you do the work. I mean, you know, what I mean by that is that, you know, Donnie, you've known me long enough to know that if Maryland Public Television called me up today and said, Charles, we really appreciate your work, but we no longer are going to have you as us, you know, to work for us, do you think I would stop?
Hell no.
No, because I've never needed what I call traditional mainstream journalism to feed me, nor did I need, you know, someone who had the wherewithal to, you know, pay me to kind of chart that next progress. And yes, I derive inspiration from you, Donnie, because you are unapologetically Black.
Okay, one last question. I have a whole minute and a half. Tell me about your wife,
Miss Robbie Robinson. And
you know we're gonna pay homage to home because she allows us access to you, and she must be thanked because your team.
Right. Well, the thing is that, you know, my wife and I, you know, she does something different from me. And she enjoys hanging out with me because she goes, sometimes I get to meet people that I'd like to meet. But probably the thing is that, you know, I'm not going to have another wife. That's it. You know, look, as I told her, where the hell you going to go? And she goes, well, you know, I can have you replaced at any time. And she reminds me of that often when I'm not working. And she goes, you know, you can be replaced, but it is her ability to challenge me. And she will read some of my work. And just like my mother, I will tell her, you know, I don't have to agree with your edits. And she doesn't like that, but she's a great sounding board. And you know, and understand this, Donnie.
Come on, Charles, you get to hang out with Roland Martin, April Bryan. I mean, legends long before them. Come on, Charles, don't downplay it. She gets
Well,
to hang out with a G. You're a G, man. That's what the young people. You're a G, OG.
well, my good friend D. Watkins gave me a nickname. He called me OGJ. I said, "What the hell is that?" He goes, "You're the original gangster journalist, Charles." I was like, "Well, you know what? I'm gonna take that one." And the funny part about it, I just finished reading his latest book, Black Boy Smile, and let me suggest that if you get a chance, take a read of it. He's a guy who was a crack dealer back in the day, and now he's an accomplished author, and I call him a friend. And and what's funny is, he has a cadre of people from Devin Allen and others, and they look at me like, Charles is one of the coolest cats in the room, and I was like, no. They go, no, Charles, you are. And I have sometimes difficulty accepting that from my younger colleagues, but the fun part for me is those are the cats that I want to read. Those are the cats who I like going by and just seeing. I can't think of his name. I'm drawing a blank. Aaron Maben. Aaron Maben has a facility on the west side, and I donated a bunch of stuff to him. And so the last time I was there, he says, "Charles, stop." I said, "What's up?" He goes, "I got a new book, and I want to give it to you." And
Charles, I heard you gave the governor's son something this week.
Yes, I gave him all of my collection of the Black Panther comic books, and for me, yes, I've read them, but I said, who could benefit from it? His son is like 8 or 9. And I know his dad is often on the road. In fact, his dad is headed to Atlanta today or tomorrow, and then he's going to Sarasota. And I said, it was my escapism. In other words, I saw myself in some of those comic book figures. And I just didn't give him Black Panther. I gave him a Silver Surfer, what's the name? And I told him, I said, look, you can tell him that Uncle Chuck gave you these comic books for free. The next ones you have to buy, which means you got to save your little coins. And there is a comic book store right now.
You do know this is the son of a millionaire.
Yes, but no, one of those things, and it was funny because I talked to his wife Dawn, and Dawn and I have usually these unusual conversations. And I said, "Well, Dawn, are you paying the kids to take the dog outside?" And she jokingly said, "Yeah, but that's part of their job." And part of that is ownership. Donnie, I don't know about you, but I've been collecting things all my life. I mean, here, real quick, I'm gonna show you something. I'm gonna turn the camera around, and on my wall are my collection of albums. And so, what do you think I was doing this morning?
You were going through the vinyl?
Going through the vinyl and playing it.
Which one did you pull?
I pulled a Confunction album out. And the reason why I pulled it out is because Soul Sonic has done a remake of Love Train. And I have it. And I was listening to it. I was like, the original was better. But that's my world. And I continue to still buy vinyl because it's like one of my favorite things to do. And then the other part of that is, I have books, I get books and I buy books. And the thing is, for me is that it gives me a broader range of things to write about.
Your first favorite book?
Native Son. It was,
Richard Wright?
Richard Wright. Richard Wright was one of those angry writers. And I related to it on so many different levels.
Is that the one that talked about the college president?
No, this was the one where
Ralph Ellison.
Well, this was the book about this guy named Bigger Thomas.
Bigger, that's the book.
Yeah, who worked with these white folks and ended up killing this woman and throwing her in a furnace. And it just spoke to me. But that's not the, I mean, that was the first book I fell in love with. But of course, I read James Baldwin and I find myself just like, ow,
Charles, who was the most influential Marylander you've ever met?
oh, there are a couple of them. Early on in my career, I had a fifth grade. My first black male teacher was Horace Ashby when I was in the fifth
Mine was
grade.
Mr. Kermit Williams.
Right, who was who ended up working with Spiro Agnew. And I ran into him many, he was a Republican, and I ran into him many years ago. And I explained to him, I said, you don't know me, and you probably won't remember me, but you taught me in the fifth grade. And one of the
It's
things—
the black guy, white guy.
It's a black guy. And, and Ashby was interesting because, like I said, first of all—
You were inspired by a black Republican.
Oh, absolutely. And what he
I'll
did
say
was—
that, Charles, because people get the Republican thing. Black people get it really twisted.
No, well, I understand that, I've known black Republicans literally all my life because of just kind of the world I'm in, when I was working in Cincinnati.
Our grandmothers were Republicans.
Right. But the other part of that is that he challenged me to move beyond the peripheral. And I'll give you an example. He decided that he was going to have us do a talk show in our class, and I was going to lead one about a television show called The Time Tunnel, and me and another guy were going to go back and forth.
What year was it?
This is like circa 1966, maybe 66. Yeah. And, like I said, he ended up working in the Agnew administration. But, but a lot of people— I mean, I'm also reminded that I had a—
Did he remember you?
He didn't, but that was okay. Because, over time, you don't remember. He's dead now, but, I had
How could he not remember a Charles Robinson? I know you were clowning.
No, because, he was, by the time I met him when I was in my 20s, I think he was almost 60 or 70 years old. And you can't remember every kid that you taught in fifth grade. But I explained to him how he influenced me. Then you remember
the smart ones, and you remember the bad ones.
Probably the bad ones too, but like I said, it between all of that, my neighborhood and delivering those Afro-American newspapers to some of the smartest individuals I had ever met, and who questioned me about what was in the paper. And, I was often kind of—
because you had to read the newspaper in those days to sell it.
Yes. And I didn't initially because I was about the dollars. Let me just say that up front. But
you weren't really about the dollars till you started reading the paper, because then you could sell even more newspapers. And let me guess, you caught the bus for free at Northern Pennsylvania.
No, I caught the bus at where was it? At Mondawmin, and took it all the way around to Penlow Street and sold whatever.
That sounds like a 22 bus. Do you remember Earl Colger and the Pocket?
No, I don't remember that, but
this was a publication after you left the community that a young man had. Okay, Charles, we got to wrap this up. I will.
Dude, I got to go back to work. Look, I got to go back to work here.
Any final thoughts before we disconnect?
Just that, first of all, thank you for always recognizing me. It's important that, I always remind people I'm nobody. I'm just that dude that's standing on the side. I appreciate—
with an ink pen.
With an ink pen. And I often, know that yes, some people gravitate towards me, some people don't. But I think my colleagues, and you met a lot of them in Annapolis, we spend 90 days together. And in those 90 days, we argue, we fight, we write, we record, we film, and we chronicle the comings and goings of the state. And let nobody tell you that the people in the room I work in, which is called the Pit, are some of the best reporters. Many of them have won Pulitzers. Many of them have gone on to greater things. I'm still there. And they come back and they go, Charles is still here. And that's because I still find joy in covering the state legislature.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've been speaking with senior journalist Charles Robinson III from Maryland Public Television. Thank you, Charles, for recognizing Be More News back in 2006. And also thank you for allowing me an opportunity to teach a class at Georgetown University, all because of you. We are forever in your debt. And we promise to pay it forward. Up to date, down tomorrow, huh?
Love you.
Up to date, down tomorrow. Do your day and everything will follow. Nothing to it but to do it. I got to do it, regardless of how I feel. I am somebody. I am my brother's keeper. Good morning.
Good morning.